You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 38 of Arsenal Pass. I'm Brendan Patrick, joined always by calling champion Hayden Dale. Hayden, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, Brendan. Just enjoying my last day of vacation, of holidays before I head back to work tomorrow. So the reality's starting to settle in, you know. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm sure that's exciting. I just got back to Texas. Nice 14-hour drive down. Finally have some decently stable internet so we can go back to filming. I was pretty happy that we were able to record during those weeks in which I was up in the mountains. But anyway, so today we're going to be talking about the Everfest previews that start in just over 2 weeks. And before we know it, there'll be a brand new set in hand and ready to play for the Classic Constructed ProQuest season. And with that, also probably a new meta, at least we hope. So today, Hayden and I are going to be giving you our takes and discuss what we think Everfest needs to bring, which heroes to keep your eye on in the new meta, and what we think will change, and also what will remain the same. Anyway, Hayden, before that, let's talk about your week in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, my week in Flesh and Blood. So it's been just testing, really. Nationals coming up in a little over 3 weeks. So just trying to lock in the deck that I want to play, the list I want to play, and start working on matchups and things like that for Classic Constructed. Sort of did a lot of draft testing towards the end of the year, end of 2021 and end of December. I'm hoping to get a few more drafts in over the next few weeks as well, once I can. So yeah, otherwise just, as I say, just playing some Classic Constructed, being on sort of a weird time schedule with, being on leave on holidays. So although I've just been hanging around home, I've, sort of just been testing when I can with some of the guys. And it's kind of been about it. What about yourself? I guess you haven't really been playing.
So we all know that I have been on a hiatus, but I am back. So my week in Flesh and Blood will be starting up again. I think it's tomorrow. And yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I definitely missed playing the game. It's weird because I feel like I'm going to come back and be like super washed up or something like that. Hayden, I just want to ask you real quick before we get into the news. What is Australia Nationals looking like? Is it confirmed now? Is it more likely? Because I know the last time we spoke, it was looking a little grim.
I don't know. in all honesty, the kind of like, I guess, like COVID situation around the world's kind of changed, and in Australia in particular, I guess this kind of strategies move. So it looks like things are just going to happen. I can't say with 100% certainty, but it does look like we're going to have nationals in 3 weeks at this stage. So no news to report on that front really.
Okay, and confirm that you will be playing Azalea, right?
No. I'm gonna play the Kano Spice,
Oh yeah. Well, hopefully we're gonna be talking a lot more about Kano when we talk about Everfest. But take us into the news, Hayden.
Yeah, I mean, not a whole lot has happened over the past few weeks in terms of, it's been downtime, it's been people's vacation time, holiday time. LSS, I'm sure, are taking some much needed downtime after a crazy 2021. But a few things just to recap as we head into, I guess, January, and there's a few things on the horizon, right? So, of course, we do have the ProQuest starting up in February. Season 1 of the ProQuest. There's a 4-week season there. If you haven't already seen this, you can check it out on FabTCG, and there is a event located with, where these ProQuests are. It looks like, I think all of them had to be scheduled by the end of December or sort of before Christmas. So they should all be up now. You should be able to find those ProQuest events near you and get in touch with the stores or into those. We also have the Welcome to Wraith farewell events, which are happening in the last week of January. You, again, can check out FabTCG if you want more information on those events. These are Welcome to Wraith draft events, in-store events, and you can check out the event locator to find out where you might be able to play one of those near you. We also have some videos going up on the format. I've just been recording these this week in terms of, sort of introduction to the Welcome to Wraith draft format. Brendan and myself were, I think, able to play, I know I definitely was able to play a lot of Welcome to Wraith draft, and then after Unlimited, again, got to play a lot more. Just was my favorite draft format, tried to play it at every opportunity. So bit of introduction on Welcome to Wraith draft, what it is, how to draft it, sort of some key cards and strategies, and then we've also got videos, one for each hero, so diving into how to draft those classes, the key archetypes, and what they're all about, and how to hopefully win some drafts with these archetypes, how to draft them. Otherwise, other news, I guess Everfest, we're actually so close. Obviously, we're doing the pod today talking about what we think of Everfest and what we're expecting to see in changes to Classic Constructed, but just in general, Everfest is out in less than 4 weeks. Sorry, no, it's not. Everfest comes out in the 4th of February. So yeah, just about 4 weeks from now. But previews, which is what I meant to say, start on the 24th. So that's around 3 weeks from now. And we have our preview on the 28th, which is Friday. I think it's Eastern Standard Time of Friday that it goes up sometime on that day. Not sure what time we'll put it up, so keep an eye out for that. We will let you know close to the time. And we get to open up per pack. We're going to do that on Time the Round on the 29th.
Where's the pack going, though? Is it going to Texas?
I have
or to
no clue.
Australia?
I have no clue.
Neither do I. Yeah, what I want to quickly ask you, not to divert too much of the news, what do you think about the preview season and the way it only lasts a week, right? So it feels like it kind of should be over the course of January, but it just starts on the 24th, and then quickly you just rotate into the set. Do you think that that maybe it would be better if we had it throughout the month here?
I got mixed feelings because I think Everfest being a supplemental set is less important to the Flesh and Blood storyline.
Yeah.
To some degree. There's also, from a perspective of we're not getting more adult heroes as far as we know. So the kind of the spoiling that you'd have, or the previous season you'd have with a normal set like a Tales of Aria or a Monarch, or these core sets, these base sets, where you're introducing the heroes to their community and saying, they're basically telling a story and releasing these hero by hero, right? That's how they've done it in the past. Whereas with, I guess, Crucible and now with Everfest, we know we're getting cards for every hero. It's about the classic constructive format. And so I think that kind of the week, it's a bit less of a spectacle, right? In some ways, because this is, the marquee sets of these sets that introduce new, completely new things, new talents, for instance. So I think the kind of idea of keeping it a little bit more low-key makes sense. But in saying that, we've kind of had nothing over the past, few weeks. And for the next 2 to 3 weeks, we probably won't have much in the way of things to talk about in terms of, like cards, previews, things like that. So I do wish maybe they'd just given us a few more. Obviously, we got that sort of early preview of the new Guardian young hero and what's it called? Life of the Party.
Yeah, Life of the Party.
Yeah,
and also the Crazy Brew one.
Oh yeah, rounds on me. This round.
Yeah, for me, it's like I just wish we had more time to let it marinate. Right? You gotta throw those in the pan, let those onions caramelize. Because just in the sprint in the week, I think some of the specialness of it is going to be lost on me because there's going to be so many cards so fast. Right? Still a big set, relatively so. And the thing about these supplemental sets is what they're adding is so impactful. Usually, it's not a new class. Which obviously brings its own excitement. But if you think back to like Crucible, like Bloodsheath Scalata being spoiled, like I could think about that thing for a year.
Oh yeah, we definitely talk about that card more.
Yeah, I do wish it was split up a bit. But anyway, we're gonna head into previous season, and it should be very, very exciting. I'm really pumped to get my hands on that pack, though.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I'm glad that I don't have to think about Everfest until after Nationals. So for me, I think it's a positive. I would hate to be thinking, okay, we've got the ProQuest season coming up in less than a month, and I've still got Nationals to worry about, but now we're starting to see cards for Everfest, and it's a bit distracting, I think. And I do think that's one of the reasons that LSS keep this previous season so short, is to keep everyone on a level playing field in terms of, we came from, if you're in North America in particular, you just came through a cooling season, roll into the holiday period, and then if the previous season started in early January, people are probably already starting to think about these cards and decks and whatnot. So it gives people a bit of downtime, which is nice considering it does seem like we're going to have a really hectic sort of OP schedule for 2022.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, today on this week's Time of the Round is, we don't know yet. So we haven't found out who it's going to be, but I'm sure it's going to be exciting. So still trying to figure it out. But check out, keep tuned for this weekend when it does eventually pop up. Last week's was our best moments of 2021. We hope you enjoyed that. It is awesome to, be wrapping up a year of Arsenal Pass and Flesh and Blood. And I want to shout out the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel with that as well. We are shooting for our 3,000 subscribers by the end of January. Didn't make it by December, but we'll get there. The Arsenal Pass YouTube channel does have tons of extra content in addition to the spot, including deck text, gameplay, all kinds of different stuff. Go check it out. And finally, thank you so much to all of our patrons. You help us do what we do. And yeah, just a million thanks. And a quick show is that there is a lot of extra content on the Patreon as well. Most notably the deck techs and deck guides. And we do a deck tech on the YouTube channel. We throw up the sideboard guide, deck theory, ratios, everything you need to pick it up and start being competitive on that Patreon. Mm-hmm. Anyway, Hayden, Well, I am finally out of the snow. It was very, very cold up there in Colorado, sometimes below zero. But now that I'm back in Texas, I've got my short shorts on. I've got my sunnies on as well, and my thongs, as you call them down in Australia. And I'm ready
I
to
definitely
hit
don't.
the.
I'm from New Zealand.
Ready
Bro.
you, you can't interrupt my creative process here. I'm ready to hit that command and cookout. So take us in.
Perfect. Well, in classic Brendan fashion, you've jumped the gun. Uh, do just have a couple of last items from, I guess, the news in terms of just some things to highlight. We did have a deck tech go up on Reiner, a deck that I'm unfortunately not going to be playing at Nationals, so I'm not going to be taking an alpha booster box off of Brendan by winning Nationals with it. But, maybe next year. We got time. And as well, we actually are now finally launching our Discord for our patrons. So if you are a patron, our official Discord will be launching this week by the time the pod's out, actually. And if you're not already, come and join us and join the community. We have, a place to discuss and talk about decks and deck building and formats and, everything under the sun. But yes, Brendan. Yeah, it's I tell you what, it's getting hot down here in Australia. It's been warm. The barbecues, the grills have been out for the summer.
So now I understand why you had that section highlighted on the notes here, is because I was wildly ahead of you.
In classic fashion. So, got a question this week that comes from Kyler Wahi. Kyler is an Arsenal Pass patron. Thank you for the question, Kyler, and sending that in to us. The question from Kyler is, what are alternative cards for both Command and Conquer and Enlightened Strike? I don't have these cards. I can't afford them, and I want to ask what I could sub into their spot when copying a deck list they're in. I think it's a great question. I think a lot of people would be in this sort of position of looking for alternatives. I know when we've done deck techs in the past, or we've talked about specific decks, or especially when we've talked about equipment, we have talked about alternatives. But Command and Conquer, and Enlightened Strike are two pretty key staples of the game so far, right, from our first two sets, and they seem to still be popping up in majority of deck lists. If you look at deck lists, it's very hard to find one that doesn't have Command and Conquer or E-Strike, at least one of those cards in it. So if you're building a deck, Brendan, maybe you don't have access to these cards, or you don't want to put them in, you want to look for alternatives, what are some things that you might think about subbing them out for?
So these ones are particularly tough, I feel like, because there isn't an easy substitute, in the sense there's not a card that does something super similar. They're both quite unique. Command and Cookout having the disruption for your opponent, and E-Strike having all the modes, of course. But that being said, I think that if I am trying to replace these cards in my deck, which in most decks it's very, very, very possible, I'm usually looking towards other class cards or other generics that actually further my specific game plan. So probably an example I can pull of this is like in Crucible of War, we saw a lot of ninja decks playing Command and Conquer. And I think that, sometimes a good choice and a good sub for that, or even a better card to have in your deck, would just be, maybe another combo card or another card that just kind of is more congruent with your aggressive game plan anyway, right?
Yeah, so I have some thoughts on this one, I think. The Command and Cookout, as you like to say.
Did I say Command and
Cookout?
You definitely
did.
You,
so good. So
you
good.
sneak that Freudian little thing into my brain.
Hey, dude, it's all you. The idea of these cards, like you say, in terms of finding effects that are similar, it's very difficult because Command and Conquer has a very specific effect, and you don't really see anything like this on an attack action. There's a few cards that you've got Disable and Bravo, for instance, which has a very similar effect. They'd be the closest kind of comparison, but in terms of a generic, not so much. And then Enlightened Strike, the modal kind of piece of that card is really unique. But one thing I would say is that a card like Enlightened Strike doesn't do one particular job. You're not sitting there and going, okay, I'm playing this Viscerai deck and I don't have Sonata Arcanix access to that card. No, it's very different. Enlightened Strike is doing much less of a specific role in basically any deck you play it in. So I think Enlightened Strike is the easiest card to replace. I actually think in a lot of situations, people just put Enlightened Strike in the deck because they have space to in it, or it's the first card on the sort of team sheet, so to speak, where maybe it doesn't need to be because it doesn't work with other things that you're trying to do. So I do think there is often always alternatives to Enlightened Strike, and they're actually not just a like-for-like replacement. It's probably just a completely different card that works in with the strategy that you're trying to build around. Sometimes in aggressive decks, I'd say, is where you'd miss Enlightened Strike the most, and then you're looking for cards, red line cards that do something, like a Scar for a Scar with Go Again, for instance, or a Life for a Life with Go Again, and can push an on-hit effect. It can be a 5-point life swing, for instance. So I do think there is times where you're looking for something similar, but a lot of the time, I think Enlightened Strike just gets put in because of how good a card it is. Command and Conquer, I think, more so a bit difficult to replace because of the specific effect that has, right? So We know that's really good into 5-card hand decks, into decks that play a lot of defense reactions. I guess one thing you could look at is why you're playing the Command and Conquer. So you used the example before of like a playing in Katsu. Or maybe something like an Exude Confidence is actually better in that deck. It's something that's going to stop your opponent from playing defense reactions in an aggressive deck. That could be what you're looking for. Or if you're actually looking to attack that arsenal and attack 5-card hands, then maybe you need to look at something that can do that in a certain way. And it might not even be an attack action. It could be a non-attack action in your chosen class. It could be Nature's Path Pilgrimage to provide a non-hit warrior or something similar. So I think the Command and Conquer... there we go. The Command and Conquer is a bit more difficult to replace, but I do think when you're replacing Command and Conquer in any given deck, you're probably looking for what that card is giving you in your deck. So in Brute, for instance, it's a 6 attack that costs 2 that has a relevant on-hit effect. I don't know, maybe Cadaverous Contraband could be a replacement for that because it has an on-hit effect that can get you back a Blood Rush Bellows. It's a different on-hit effect, but it's still a 6 attack and it still has an on-hit effect.
Yeah. I mean, those two cards in particular, I think that, they absolutely can be replaced with those cards they just kind of fit into your game plan. They're just totally different cards, though. Like you said, they can't really be replaced on an effect for effect basis. But I'm hoping that we get some derivatives for Command and Conquer and Lightning Strike soon. So hope maybe in line with the topic of this pod, like maybe with Everfest as well. But right now they do tend to serve a very specific function. With that being said, I do think that Command and Conquer especially is heavily overplayed. It has shined in the past metas, like it was very good in Monarch and it was pretty good in Tales of Aria as well. But that being said, I think there will be a point in the near future where the meta will shift and Command and Conquer will just be criminally overplayed and not nearly as good.
I don't know if you checked out our best of video, Brendan, but that clip talking about Command and Conquer potentially being overplayed was definitely in that video, the best of 2021. So there you go, we're already foreshadowing. Yeah, I think if you came to me and said, oh, I want to build this Bravo deck without Crippling Crush, or I want to build this Viscerai deck without Mordred Tide, that's a much tougher ask in terms of replacing those cards because of just the specific job they do in those strategies, as opposed to something more generic like a Command and Conquer and Line Strike. I think those cards are actually easier to replace. It's just about thinking about the reason those cards are in the deck and trying to find something that's similar. I don't think there's a straight alternative. It's not like if you don't have E-Strike, you play this, or you don't have Command and Conquer, you play this. It's going to be dependent on the deck.
Yeah, totally agree.
Cool. Well, if you do have any questions for the Command and Cookout section, you can send those to us in basically any way you want to. If you are a Patreon, you can also just send this to us on Discord now. But arsenalpassfab@gmail.com if you want to email them in. You can hit us up on Twitter with a direct message or an on Twitter, and we'll check those out. And we'll definitely get your questions on the Command and Cookout. Good chance to get these on at the start of the year, as we kind of cleared through most of the questions from last year and don't really have much of a backlog. So if you do want to get your question on, get it into us. But Brendan, should we move on to the main topic of the show, the big discussion?
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. So, Everfest, as we say, preview start in a few weeks. Week after that, we do have the release. Again, our preview's on the 28th. I'm very excited for this. I can't wait to see what we get. But we're anticipating at least somewhat of a shake-up of the Classic Constructed meta with its release. If we look back at Crucible, we had a lot of cards released with Crucible that, every card is designed in some way for constructed play in these sets because they're a supplemental set. So although, you get less cards overall than some of the base sets, every card is an impactful card for constructed potentially, as opposed to maybe being limited based cards. So there's a lot of things that we potentially are going to have come the start of February to look at for, building new Classic Constructed decks, editing current Classic Constructed decks, and looking at, I guess, what the new meta could or might look like. So I know we each have our thoughts on what we expect to happen, what is likely to happen, and what we want to happen, which hero stock we think might rise or fall, and which heroes that are just kind of a card or two away from glory, which could find themselves, and which could find themselves sort of on the wrong end of Everfest, with a bit of a festival hangover. They could see them sort of struggle through the next format. So I want to start by talking about what we actually expect to see from Everfest in the context of Classic Constructed. Like, what are the things that we're expecting Everfest to immediately do to Classic Constructed? And I think, Brendan, the first thing for me is I'm expecting to see some slowdown to a degree. Don't know how big it'll be, to the sort of power of aggressive decks in these past two formats. Think Lightning Briar, think the explosiveness of Chains had the ability to have. That's kind of where I think we're going to see some impact immediately. Although I did say that for Tales of Aria.
Yeah, it's funny because I actually disagree with you after Tales of Aria. I think that you and I have been thinking that the format slowing down, or cards that will help the format slow down, have basically, we've wanted them to come for a long time now, and they haven't, right? Or at least they have in design, but they haven't in kind of the way they've affected the meta. So do I think that Everfest will bring cards that will slow down the format? Maybe, right? But I don't think it's going to be a key design kind of pillar of that set. Because if we look at Tales of Aria, it really looked like Frost was built to do exactly that. And while it did have an effect, it didn't have as much an effect as we would have thought. So I think that Everfest may just be a little bit more of the same in terms of kind of card design, right? In terms of like, there will definitely be a lot of tools for aggro, there'll be a lot of tools for mid range, and probably a similar amount for slower decks as well. So I think that the effect on the format, I'm skeptical. Right? I'm skeptical. Right?
You're spectacle?
Spectacle. Yeah, Command and Cookout, and I'm pretty spectacle over here about that card. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you think, but definitely for a while now, we've been kind of waiting for something to slow down the format. And I just think that the design of Flesh and Blood may have pivoted a bit, whether intentional or unintentional, to where we are in the era of proactive decks and game plans.
Yeah, so I think proactiveness and aggressive speed are two very different things, right? And I know you agree with that, but just pointing it out. And while I think we did definitely think the format would slow down with Tales of Aria, I think actually now that you look at it, it did slow down to a degree. Not much, but the prevalence of setup decks and sort of more mid-range decks, and the fact we do have decks like All Time viable in the format. To me, it felt like control decks in the last format were just not viable at all. Whereas I feel like now you do have this viability to play something like I think All Time is a very good deck. So I do think I guess the piece I put on is that when I say slow down, I don't think we're going to move to this like control heavy format with like mid-range decks that start to emerge like I thought we might see with Tales of Aria. But I do think that we see, some decks that have the ability to play more control style or setup style get some tools. And I think that's where we're going to see more so maybe necessarily than us seeing like hate cards to slow down decks like Raya. I think what we see is cards that help some of these, strategies that are just, a link or two away from being able to play these sort of setup strategies or more maybe control-based strategies, get a few options to make them a bit more viable. And I think that will somewhat slow the format down. That's kind of where I think it'll be. But I don't think we're going to see, I know before Tales of Aria, we felt like, oh, maybe we're going to see like the rise of mid-range decks. And when we first saw the set come in because of Frost and things like that, we thought like, Rhinar was going to be like one of the best decks in the format because of that, or even Livia. So I think that we see a little bit of a slowdown, but yeah, I think like you say, the design that we thought we might see with Tales of Aria, that's not where we're going direction-wise. So yeah, I think it's interesting though.
Yeah, for sure. So what I think we're going to see out of Tales of Aria, and this is slightly a cop-out because I guess we have a small hint towards that, is more card draw. Like if you look at the new Guardian hero, I don't know if you know her name off the top of your head.
Elder?
Yeah,
Guidance?
I think that's it. Yeah, so we do see a hint towards card draw being more prevalent in the game, and I think that it's an area that's a bit underexplored at the moment. Maybe for a good reason, right? Because I don't know if you've ever played a deck with with card draw, you've kind of seen how powerful those effects can be, and especially 5-card versus 4-card is just ridiculous in this game. Nevertheless, I think that it will be a design space that will be more explored in Everfest. And like you said, and I can't take credit for this idea because it did come from you, that could manifest in the expansion of the copper, silver, and gold mechanic.
Ooh, yeah, I'm interested to see what we get. I hadn't really thought about, I guess my thought, we did this separately, right? We kind of came up with our thoughts on this separately to just, facilitate discussion once we get onto the pod. And I was definitely thinking more along the lines of like big macro changes and, like where the format direction will go. And I like that you've thought more about what we actually see specifically. Like, what does that mean? Like the card draw aspect and things like that. And obviously we have some hints of that already. Yeah, I don't know. The card draw piece, so from what we've seen so far, it looks like it's going to be something, but maybe this is a mechanic we see more in Blitz, right? Maybe Cashin and Kasai and Valda are more, obviously the young heroes, those two. So maybe it's more viable in Blitz, for instance. I don't know, but card draw kind of scares me a little bit in this game because we've seen the impact of it with cards like Plunderan, with Tome of Fiendal and other formats, with High Octane. Like that kind of idea does scare me a little bit, to be honest. So I'd be interested to see what it is. Hopefully it's to a degree where it's more about I guess, cycling things through, or the ability to maybe net a card with a bit of work, which allows you to have setup. Because if you think about like setup decks, right, what are some of the most powerful things you can do is already have your resources on the board in the form of your equipment, or maybe even like a potion. And for us to then, start to think about, well, we have like 5, 6, 7 card hands for big setup turns. That sounds very frightening to me.
I mean, like you said, a system to filter could also be on the menu as well, and that is, I guess, a derivative of card draw. And
Yep.
that is exactly what we see with the current copper system. So it could be interesting, like an interesting kind of thing to add to the game, right? A better way to filter your hand, reduce variance, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I like the way it's been done so far. You take a card like Tome of Fiendal, costs you 1 resource, and it costs the card itself. So one of the card draw replaces Tome, and then you're getting some of your resources back potentially, and then you gain the life. So you get an added bonus on your card draw. So I like that idea. We've got cards that cantrip, that filter through, like High Octane, for instance, replaces itself, and then gives you this bonus effect for the turn. So I like those kind of effects, and I'd be happy to see more of those kind of things. I think they're easier to balance and work with. If anything says, we start to see more things that say draw 3 on it, I'm starting to get scared.
Yeah, I mean, the effect of having just one additional card from your opponent on a consistent basis is much more powerful than I think I originally thought it would be in this game.
Yeah, because of the ability to set up these big turns, right? When we first were playing Flesh and Blood through the first 2 sets, these kind of big setup turns, it was kind of a joke, right? Like people talked about like OTK Kano with like getting 6 potions into play and stacking your deck with Whisper of the Oracles and stuff. And now these kind of powerful plans are actually, somewhat viable. Crucible gave us tools for that, and we've had more since then. So, yeah, I think I agree. I think one thing we're going to see, or I expect to see from Everfest, is the growth of the talent system in terms of realization of what this could be for certain heroes who have already, these talented heroes that we've already seen so far. And I guess what I mean by that is that we take the heroes from Monarch, we take even the heroes we've just had from Tales of Aria. I expect that we'll see cards that round out things we've seen already, but don't quite feel right. So there's a few things with Prism, right? We say, okay, feels pretty one-dimensional. You've got this aura thing. You've got Iris of Reality is a weapon that just seems like it's just strictly worse than the other weapon, right? And then do we now get from this set some cards that round out those I guess opportunities to play different things? It seems like with like Earth Ultim, for instance, it seems like really underexplored because it kind of feels a bit underpowered right now. Maybe we get a few more options for that round out the ability to play those decks in Classic Constructed or even Blitz Constructed, and that's what I expect us to see, is just this kind of, I guess, additive to the talent system heroes in some way. And I don't know what that looks like. I guess I'm assuming it's going to look similar to what we saw in those base sets, but it could also look completely different.
It's interesting, right? I'm not, that's the thing is, like, I'm not totally sure. I've wondered about the Illusionist class. Like, how does the Illusionist class get expanded upon? Is it when we get an actual Illusionist revealed in a set, right? Like in a class, like in Arcade Rising or Tales of Aria, like whatever it is, and that will expand that card pool. But right now it does feel like, a lot of those Illusionist cards are kind of ancillary at most. Like this sort of more aggressive line, Spears of Surreality, Phantasmaclasm, all these cards, they're really, really cool. But right now it just feels like you have sort of 2 ways to go with Prism, and they're both a part of the same coin, right? You're either the Aura plan or the aggressive plan, or sort of a mix and match of both with a transformative sideboard. But that is the class that I'm most awaiting, I guess, most waiting for an expansion of the Illusionist cards.
Well, it is your main, so I guess that makes sense. We've hard claimed that it's your main. Because of cards like Spears of Surreality is actually a card I was thinking about as well, or Phantasmify even. These cards that have seen a lot less play because the light talent for, I guess, Illusionist was much more driven to those cards. So they're actually kind of on the opposite spectrum of what I was talking about. I was thinking about the talent system itself, but those cards are actually non-talented cards, right? So what's the impact of those? Like, do we get a young Illusionist and that kind of fills a role until we get another Illusionist in a future set? Or do we actually see some talented cards that can use those to some degree? It's really interesting. That's kind of what I mean. Like, which direction does it get taken with the set? Do cards that, strategies that already exist, do they get more cards for those strategies? Or actually, do we get some different cards for these talented heroes that give it a bit of a different feel in the talent sort of pie that they're in? and then also allow some of these cards that have come already that maybe not be talented or could be support style cards become relevant for those heroes. So, but yeah, I do just think whatever way we go down, we're going to see some support to help, especially a hero like Bolton. I think we're going to see something there that's going to either be additive or just a little bit derivative of the current sort of strategies we have.
So what do I expect from Tales of Aria? I'm just going to throw a little bait out there. I'm going to say I expect I expect a bard, an adult bard, maybe young one to go with it as well. What? It was in the lore. Did you not read the lore?
Yeah, I did. So
I lit a candle, turned off the lights, put a little blanket over my head, and I read the lore, and it's like, there's a bard coming. Do I actually think that? I don't know. It's definitely not congruent with previous design. We only have one sample size to pull from, which is Crucible of War. That being said, I think adult heroes being released in supplemental sets is totally reasonable, and I would welcome it.
All right,
Can there be an entire new class printed though? That is a stretch of design. Is that possible? That is the question. But I would really like that. I mean, the bard is obviously a fan favorite. It's something we've all wanted, and I don't know. I just think it could be a really good addition. It seems like they've been hinting at it pretty hard, but they could just be trolling us.
Could be. I mean, the Crucible, I guess, pattern to follow would be release a young bard, right? Like we had Cavdine.
Yeah.
We had the young merchant.
For sure.
It'd be interesting to see what that means for Everfest. But yeah, could be. I mean, as one thing we know about Legend Story Studios is that they're not afraid to change up the formula. And what we expect to happen, as we talk about in the section, it very well could be.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly.
They do the opposite.
Exactly. So we will talk about some of the things that we don't expect to see, and those could be the ones that happen. So one I did want to talk about is I expect to see from Everfest actually very limited support for some of the more difficult to play heroes. And I'm looking at Kano/Wizard for a particular reason that I think that hero is one that has quite a high skill curve to it. And I think even just printing a few cards could push that into broken territory, to be honest, even in Classic Constructed, but especially in Blitz. Although if they're not as worried about Blitz because they can kind of manage that format through bannings, etc., and it's more of a casual format, maybe it's not as relevant. But yeah, I mean, the class probably only needs a few pieces to be pretty impressive potentially. So I think we actually see limited support, or we see it taken in another direction. Some things that come in to support a different sort of playstyle. Maybe Aether Conduit becomes playable. Who knows?
I think that there's kind of a general consensus that the wizard class and Kano as a hero is very fragile, right? Like too many tools could make it oppressive, and it's one of the worst decks to be oppressive because it can feel non-interactive, right? I think that a meta where Kano was very far ahead from everything else and just dominating would definitely warp people's ability to even like kind of play the game at all. Because if you've ever played against Kano and Blitz and kind of had one of those non-games, you realize that like it doesn't really feel like flesh and blood. So I think they're very, very sensitive with that class. And also, I may have heard from a birdie that potentially that class is very good in private development and private testing, and we just haven't really brought it to fruition, or maybe it's just not as consistent as it needs to be for professional level events.
The long-standing rumor that Wizard is just completely broken. I also think that Warrior, to some degree, specifically Dorinthia, kind of sits in this camp to a little bit. I don't think it's as much a skill curve, but I do think that a few more cards get printed, especially things that might work with something like Unified Decree, which I will still stand as a very, very strong card with the right sort of support package around it. A few more cards that could interact with that, and you have a deck that is probably very linear, but very just awful to play against if you want to defend. And since defending is half the game in Flesh and Blood, that doesn't sound very fun to me. So yeah, I'm expecting we see really sort of tailored support, but maybe slightly throttled support for some of these classes.
Yeah, I would counter in the sense that I think that Legend Story Studios doesn't care how miserable it is to play against Dorinthia because they keep giving Warrior tools. Nah, it seems like Warrior is just a class that we seem to keep printing cards for, right? It's a very, it's a class people love, class people like to play. For a lot of people, it's their entry class. So I could see Warrior getting a lot more support. But I'm definitely on the side with you that I hope that Tall Warrior in the form of Dorinthia doesn't get some sort of oppressive tool set to move forward with.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's kind of it from what we expect to see from Everfest. We kind of talked about a lot of these. I guess the last thing I didn't mention is there some maybe potentially unfinished strategies that we saw with like Ninja, with the Crucible cards with Heron's Flight and Flood of Force, and maybe those cards are just bad, Flood of Force in particular, but maybe there's something there, and we see that with the release of Everfest, something happens, or there's some cards that allow that support package to be played, and all of a sudden those cards become good. So I do think that at least for some heroes, that will happen. Some cards that realize strategies will happen, but not for every class. And I think that's very purposeful and for good reason.
Yeah, there's actually quite a few of these. Like you said, the Earth Guardian, Illusionist, and like you said with Ninja as well. So there's quite a few that we can get shored up and kind of rounded out. And I'm definitely hoping for that. And I think you spoke to a point that I've been thinking about for a while, which is those Crucible additions to Ninja. They didn't really see play, and it's like there's so much design there. It's crazy.
Well, there's certain classes that haven't had anything since Crucible, right? Ninja being one of them. That we just haven't seen anything since Crucible. So yeah, it'd be Mechanologist as well. It'd be interesting to see what happens there. But I think my call is we get some cards for them. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what those look like. I think we'll see some strategies being rounded out, whether it even be like more boost orientated strategies in Dash, for instance, or item based strategies. Mm-hmm. What do we want to see? What are the things we want to see, Brendan? Like dream list, wish list. You don't necessarily expect them to happen, but these are the things that you really want to see with Everfest.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to do a quick shout out to Jason Long and
the guy's so smart with his set predictions. He's probably correct as well.
Yeah. So in regards to Wizard specifically, another damage amplifying card, so a card like Aether Flare, something that hopefully doesn't make Wizard oppressively overpowered or have some sort of cheesy strategy, but does punish people for not being prepared for it. Something that a card like Aether Flare does very, very well. So yeah, for me, that's going to be my number one. That's what I want to see. I want to see Wizard be able to function a bit better into the meta. It just seems like it's just a tough pick, right? It's a tough pick into almost every field. Maybe into a Pro Tour, it's okay, but right now I think it needs a few pieces, and that's really what I'm waiting for, which is definitely no secret. I've said it a few times.
What if I've got something to give you here? What if you could have a pair of boots that said you start the game with 10 plus life?
Is that good enough to get rid of my Storm Striders?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
Oh, I think I'd still pick Storm Striders, to be honest. Ooh. But if you have those kind of boots, if you have those boots, your game plan would change quite a bit, right?
Yeah, I agree. It'd be a very different game plan.
Maybe I could finally play my GTL Kano. I mean, so yeah, that would be nice.
People flip over maybe they're just called like I don't know, Kano's big boy boots. He flips them over and just tank Kano ready to go. Okay, good to know. I want to see. So we talked about the format slowing down a bit. I think my expectation is it slows down a little bit. And when I say slow, I don't necessarily mean that we move to like control and mid-range decks, but I think that we see more time for things to happen during the game to some degree. We see strategies that are less aggressive focused be viable. I would love to see, though, and I don't expect this to happen, but to see a return of the sort of mid-range decks and games and key transition points being in the mid-game. I don't think we see this happen because it hasn't been the design in the last two sets and would be quite a change in the design. And I don't even necessarily think it'd be a good thing for the game, but I would personally like to see it. I think it would drive a lot of different strategies and make some things viable that are currently not viable. But yeah, I don't think that we will necessarily get this, unfortunately, for me. It's probably not. It's probably a good thing we don't get it, though, to be honest.
Yeah, I think we delve deep on that, on unpacking that kind of philosophical question that it is in the Patreon pod. But yeah, there's not inherently an issue with the current formats and their speed and the way they function in terms of like not really allowing for a lot of deck stacking or combo, mid range, all that. I'm okay with that, and I'm okay with that moving forward. I will say that even though I don't want it, I think more combo in the game might be healthy because I know there's a reasonably large subset of players that really, really enjoy that, and I think right now there's not a ton of decks that help kind of scratch that itch.
You don't want to play Saber Bolton?
Yeah, maybe a little bit more interactive. But,
yeah. Well, you get this crazy brew combo is coming. Yeah,
exactly. Like I love that. I love I love having kind of dual purposes for something, or at least having another card that can, utilize something like Crazy Brew that maybe you weren't able to. You were able to play the card, but then you weren't able to really get a lot of value out of it, and it's just sitting on there. So you have another card that's related to that. I think that the design of design. What is that card called? The one that utilizes Crazy Brew.
Um, this round's on me, or next round's on me, or something.
Whatever. Well, whatever it is, I think that is such a cool way to implement like what I think is fundamentally an awesome design of a card, which is Crazy Brew, and then bring it up to where it has a bit more of a use case and can be a bit more competitive as well.
Yes, yeah. This round's on me is what it's called.
Yeah.
There we go, and it's a majestic at blue. Oh no, that's the wrong card. That's the life of the party is the one that uses the Crazy Brew. This round's on me is the each hero draws a card 1 and attacks have -1. The quote unquote Katsu Hoser, it was if Katsu needed that already. But I tell you what, this round's on me actually leads me to my next kind of point on what we want to see, and that's what I want to see a few more interactive cards. And I think actually we're going to get this because this round's on me kind of already points to this being something that we're seeing with just the second card spoiled. But cards like Blizzard or Channel Lake Frigid or even Chains of Eminence, I think these are good ways to balance interaction with, I guess, I don't want to say hate cards, but they kind of are in a way, right? Like they do a certain thing that targets the opponent's ability to do anything or do a specific thing on any given turn when you play this card. Channel Lake Frigid, of course, can do that for multiple turns. And I think these sort of cards are good for the game as long as they're balanced in the right way. Because, sometimes they can feel a bit unfun and you don't want to be playing against decks that just get to... I don't want to play against, if you've ever played Magic, these kind of, these hate bear decks that just basically stop you from playing the game, or these lockout prism style decks that stop you from playing the game. So I'm glad that we do see some of these cards already. And I think we're going to see some things like this in the next set. I now believe that we're going to, and I do also want to see it. I think we had Chains of Eminence in Arcane Rising, and then we had like Snag, the infamous Snag in Crucible. And you've seen this rounds on me now. What else might we see with Everfest? It'd be interesting.
Yeah, I just can't believe you forgot to mention Aetherize. Remember that little card, the one that was so speculated on when those like Eclipse and Doomsday were revealed, that it actually went up in price like drastically. But Aetherize still has yet to kind of see the light of day. Maybe in Kano Mirrors and Constructed, but I've literally never played one of those. I would like, interaction like Aetherize, but that might start to drift in towards the no-no territory of denying your opponent to be able to play the game, like you said you want to avoid.
Yeah, it has to be really careful about it. Aetherize is actually an interesting one because that one could potentially be really powerful because it's a blue resource card that pitches. Of course, it doesn't defend, so it's only potentially good in certain matchups. But yeah, that's the kind of Aetherize's design worries me a little bit more than maybe something like Chains of Eminence, for example. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I do think it can be, you see a lot of these effects printed at generic in terms of because they want to balance how this effect can be applied across each class, which I think makes sense. But we have seen it with Ice, of course, be in a talent, but it does feel like that's pretty specific to just Ice as a talent in general. It's about slowing the game down. It's about, about this Frost idea. So probably we're going to see this stay in the generic sort of wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Other things I want to see, Brennan, would be more setup-based cards like we saw in Crucible. And I don't know if we're going to... It's so hard for me to say whether we're going to see this or not. I think it could honestly go either way. We could see a very similar footprint to Crucible, like we talked about, where we get this, plus we get, maybe some weapons that do this sort of thing, or we get more equipment that's about around setup-based sort of things. But yeah, I think you look at decks like Viserai, or... possibly, could we see something with like Earthbriar? I know like Channel Mountain Rock, for instance, is like a really strong card, but it's like what does that card do in like an Autumn Shell right now? Is it a card it's viable in Autumn Shell? So there's certain things that I'd love to see more setup based things, and it, probably for certain heroes. Like for instance, I don't think certain heroes need more setup based effects, but some heroes could really use it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and take your point here because this is one I think a lot of us will share, and it's that we want more support for classes that have not been very good, or tier 1, as you would say. But
Yeah.
I mean, tier 1 and tier 3 is kind of hard to say because does it ascend or descend? We'll say garbage tier, or at least bottom tier. Things that have struggled. Like we all want to play more Wizard. We all want to play more Azalea, Levia, even Bolton to an extent in Classic Constructed, and I think that helps the game feel a lot more, I don't know, flushed out per se. Because right now I think that Flesh and Blood is an extremely well balanced game, but there is sort of a feels bad moment if you're sort of a person that likes to role play or identify with a certain class, and you happen to identify with a ranger or a levia, or something like that. Those classes they could become very strong in certain metas. So I don't think they're completely based off needing an additional card or something like that. But I would like to see things like Wizard, and of course the others, become much more playable in Classic Constructed.
Yeah, you are right. Some of these don't need a single card. Some of these need a lot of cards.
Or they need a meta. Like some of them do need a meta.
Yeah,
to
that's
be
true.
fair.
That's true. It's true. I do feel that's how I feel about Rhinar, for instance. I feel like probably one card in a meta would be pushing that deck into being one of the best decks in the format. So yeah, I do agree. I would like to see a different direction for playstyles on some of the heroes that I don't like, or some of the classes I don't like. So Prism, for instance, I'd love to see. These cards I really like in Illusionist, but Light Illusionist kind of puts me off to a degree with this kind of aura-based strategy or these only hero-based strategies. I would love to see some cards, maybe change the direction of how that class could be played. Same with Mechanologist. Of course, we've seen like the mid-range and control decks in the past. I've always been a big fan of the boost mechanic and the weapons that we've seen come in. We saw the Pleasant Barrel Shot. I'd love that card to be highly playable and that strategy be able to be more supported because it doesn't interact very well with breaking the combat chain and things like that, which is what often you want to do with some of the cards in Dash. So yeah, I'd love to see, I guess, a change of strategy that maybe enables for like a really heavily boost oriented deck. Maximum velocity becomes like one of the best cards in the deck, etc., etc. That's probably what I'm looking for.
Yeah, my last one here is going to be I would like a card, a generic that is anti-fatigue. I think that there is a lot of cards that play very well in certain strategies, cards that were designed to host those strategies. We can think about the Guardian Shield, we can think about Snag, we can think about Changes of Eminence. I think that if there was a generic card that had a specific game against fatigue strategies, it could be very helpful. So I don't personally struggle with fatigue too much. Like I don't find it to be a big pain point, but I do think that it's not good for the game, like inherently. I think that that's like a terrible game experience. It's like to be, imagine if you were playing tabletop and your brother had a fatigue deck and you had whatever deck, and every game just ended with you running out of cards. It wouldn't be very fun. The argument is that you adapt your game plan and play more efficiently and play more effectively and beat that strategy. But at the end of the day, I don't think that fatigue should be like a legit, prevalent, and popular way to win the game in Flesh and Blood in Classic Constructed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm probably on the opposite side to you, where I want these strategies to be viable, but I want classes to be able to play in a certain way where it doesn't matter. So one thing I would say, you talked about like just change your strategy or whatever. I think people shouldn't have to necessarily change their hero to be able to beat these strategies, but they should maybe have to change their strategy, and that obviously makes them worse against other decks, etc. And I think that's okay. But I think at the moment we don't even necessarily have that, because some of the heroes or some of the classes have really one-dimensional sort of abilities to play games. Whether that be because of like the weapons they have, because of the card pool they have, because they just don't have quite the power in some of these cards. There's a few different reasons, I think. So I'd probably want to see more support for the classes rather than targeted hate cards. And that leads me nicely, Brendan, onto what would be best for the health of the game. And I think that's actually one of the things that would be best for the health of the game with Everfest, is to see not necessarily directed hate, but to build up and help support classes that can't play in a certain way or can't play in the current meta because of the way that the meta is driven, because they just don't have the ability to do it. So whether that comes through interaction, which is fine, or whether that comes from just changes of playstyle or increases in power level to the current playstyle, I think those are a better path, personally, for the health of the game than printing things that are going to specifically target or hate out or make other strategies specifically worse with one or two cards.
Yeah, I think that kind of the most visceral time of that specific pain point was Monarch, right? Like you had a choice. It's like, do I want to play an aggressive strategy? Okay, I have to play Chain, right? Like, because nothing is faster. At least the delta of nothing is faster than Chain. It's like, I don't want to play Chain. How do I beat it? Well, 99% of people, their strategy to beat it was to play some sort of controller fatigue deck. And like, I totally agree with you. Like there were so many heroes that were left out because they just couldn't deal with change strategy. Obviously, he's an outlier because he was, you know, notably broken, as we've seen with the banning. But
But it's a good
extrapolating that to the Tales of Aria format, like you can still see it. Like there are some people that just their classes like really can't deal with something like Briar.
Yeah, it's a good example though, I think, although it might be, like you say, on the one end of the spectrum. You take that format, the format with Chain, and you look at something like Katsu, which I think was actually a really strong, like Katsu aggro was a really strong deck in that format because of how it played into, even like the control decks, but also the fact that you could, I mean, you weren't favored, but you could get a reasonable matchup with Chain, but give that card get that deck a bit of support. And yeah, it might have been able to get somewhere close to 50-50. Obviously, Chain was so far on the spectrum, maybe not, but maybe you replace that with Briar and you have the same conversation. So yeah, I do think that supporting the ability for classes to play in a certain way, as opposed to just specifically printing blanket cards that hate, is the way to go for the health of the game, because you just get into this, I guess, you get in a position where we could just end up with a bunch of cards that hate on certain strategies, and people are just playing 60 card decks with 15 card hate sideboards, and that's really not where I want to play Flesh and Blood. I don't think that's enjoyable. So yeah, I think that's probably one of the big things for the health of the game.
And I think if you come from the player point of view, especially like the casual player base, people that identify with a certain hero, it's very desirable if your hero can kind of do a little bit of everything, right?
Mhm.
Can play aggressively, can play mid range, can play control. So when you really lack the tools to play like one of those three core strategies, it kind of feels like I'm pigeonholed into playing this specific way.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to do them all well, and it doesn't have to do all of them, but it'd be nice if it could do more than one, right? Like, you look at Azalea, okay, cool, maybe there's a combo deck there that wasn't very good, but that, could play it, so was there some support to make that a bit better? Plus, there's this aggressive sort of tempo-based build. Okay, I don't really need a control build, but can I at least have a couple of ways to play this deck? I think that's important. So, yeah, I guess for health of the game, one of the other things I would like to see is no drastic changes. No, and this is funny because this kind of stands in contradiction to the thing I would like to see. But for the health of the game, I think no drastic changes is best. So small incremental changes, cards that add some support to classes that need it, some things that maybe change the way that heroes can play in terms of their strategies to some degree, but nothing that is going to just shift the needle of the format so far away from where we currently are, or make current classes just so unplayable, I guess. I think that would be terrible for the health of the game.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting one. Like I think like fundamentally I agree. I also would like to see the game, at least the meta, change a lot. Probably not the game. So I think I'm pretty in line with what you're saying, but at the same time I do want to chase the dragon and get some crazy cards that are gonna switch stuff up.
Yeah, which is fine. But imagine if you just bought into your Briar deck and you just bought into your Alton deck, and then all of a sudden those two heroes just aren't viable at all. Not just that the playstyle needs to change or the deck build needs to change somewhat, or some support comes in. Those heroes just aren't viable. Like that would suck, I think. And big needle change is just not good for the game. And I don't think we'll get it. I don't think we'd ever see that. Crucible brought in a lot of tools for things to change, but it wasn't necessarily trying to change the way the game was playing. But also Crucible was at a time where Flesh and Blood was still releasing its initial kind of base concept. So the changes were bigger. So I don't expect to see Everfest make as many changes as possibly Crucible would have introduced, for instance.
Yeah, I agree. So, I mean, I'll quickly say, because this is sort of a weirder point and totally relative to the time period you're in, but I would like to see the class constructed meta shift, right? Like I would like to see the dominance, or at least the popularity of Briar sort of wane a bit to get more of a diverse meta, and maybe even a meta that's not aggro first, right? Because it does feel like we've been in that for a while. That being said, like that's just because I want things to shake up. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with where we currently are, but I would like to see, I'd like to see Everfest be totally different, new, and exciting for the competitive scene.
Yep. Yeah. I think it's going to be a balancing act. And talk about the health of the game. Well, it needs to make enough changes for it to feel impactful and to be exciting and enjoyable, and to actually, I do think it needs to change, right? But it's to the degree. It's going to be a balancing act. So it'll be interesting to see how LSS have balanced it. But in theory, like supplemental sets are the time to make these balances, right? At the time to give the support that's needed for certain classes to help guide and shape what sort of the next format looks like. And kind of end cap the 2 sets we've just had.
Yeah.
So, what, I guess we talk about health of the game. Anything that you just straight out just don't want to see? I mean, we kind of already talked about this as we went through. I know for me, I don't want to see power creep be too big. I think I kind of talked about this as a thread through the whole thing. I'd like to see, again, more smaller needle moves, but any kind of like huge power creep on classes to the point where, if all of a sudden Azalea became the best hero because XYZ were printed, that would probably be pretty bad because it sets a precedent that I don't want to see. And I think the other thing for me I don't want to see is like cards that support strategies that look fine but are close to being broken. So I think about, for instance, a card that maybe we see a functional reprint of Blazing Ether, or another card that does something similar would be completely broken. I think in Wizard, a card that overly supports the play of like Channel Mount Heroic, for instance, could be an issue. So there's a few things that I really don't want to see too many of these cards that could be broken be pushed over the top.
Yep. For me, it's just cards that allow for non-interactive games and non-interactive game plans. Usually those fall in the category of combo cards. Well, I like I said earlier in the cast that I do want more combo to be available to players who enjoy that strategy. Combinations of cards that lead to games where your opponent is literally not able to play. I don't think are good for the health of the game. I don't think they're intentionally designed either. I just think that there's definitely a danger with creating a strategy like Saber Bolton. To where if it's not, like medium, it could be really, really oppressive and really bad for the game too. Because like if we were all playing Saber Bolton, I can't imagine that'd be great.
Yeah. I think these combo decks, I'd like to them be somewhat interactive to a degree. Like you'd be able to interact with them in some way, shape, or form. Which that could be with existing cards, or it could be with cards we see in the set. So yeah, it goes back to that point about I guess points of interaction. Which cards could be relevant. Like how good is Blizzard against the Bolton Sabres combo, for instance? Like, there's a good example of what those cards.
Yeah, it's weird because we have so many more. We have some more tools since we had to really think about that deck, so it could be significantly worse now. But it's just an example, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, any kind of combination of cards that is going to lead to non-interactive games. I assume that this would be on accident in terms of the design. Let's avoid that because it's very possible. It's very, very possible. You would hope so, but it could happen, right?
Yeah. So I want to talk about, I guess, the impact on heroes and classes. So if we look at the current meta, obviously you'd say it seems like the Rune Blades are kind of sitting near the top. We've got decks like Ultim that seem to be doing pretty well. If we look at what the, I guess, impacts could be, or which heroes are likely to feel the biggest impact, where do you think we sit with that with Everfest?
Yeah, so I assume that Lightning Briar will feel a significant effect because that strategy would remain dominant, I think, for a very, very long time, unless the design had anticipated it being as good as it is, right? This kind of 0 for X damage is just so good, not having to actually pay for resources on the card you play. So yeah, I mean, that one I think is going to take a hit. I assume that there is some sort of plan, whatever there might be to balance out from that. But yeah, I'm not sure what you think. I think for me, it's just like Lightning Briar. While I think it's a fun deck, it's a skill-based deck. I think that strategy could remain dominant for a really, really long time and actually negate a lot of cool design just because it's so proactive and so linear and just really good.
Yeah, there's an interesting piece around Lightning Briar in particular, I think, where there's this big spectrum of where people sit. There's a lot of people in the camp of something needs to be done, and this strategy is too oppressive. And then we interestingly have this group of people who say that no, it's beatable. There's a lot of strategies that beat it consistently. My take personally is that it's a very powerful strategy. It's very linear, which is easy to play, makes it accessible. I do think those kind of strategies are good for the game. I do, however, think that what we've seen with Lightning Briar is that it's probably a bit too powerful personally, and I definitely am not on board with there being a multitude of strategies that have consistency against it, to be honest. So yeah, I do think I would like to see, and I think we will see that there's some impact on Lightning Briar. I think just in general, Rune Blades, they might not get worse, but I think they at least stand still, and we see some support for other classes to play in certain ways that can interact with that. And someone like Bravo is an interesting spot, I think, because it might get some support, or it might get a little bit of support. But even, I guess, indirect impact could mean that it just it shifts. So either that, Bravo needs to change the way it plays, or the viability of certain strategies with Bravo shift. So, maybe it needs to move towards like an aura-based strategy to be relevant to the next format. I don't know, but I think that classes that see little impact could actually see really big impact just in the way that they need to play in a potential new meta.
Yeah. So Hayden, I know this is what you've been waiting for, but
Everyone's
what hero stocks do you think will rise? Like who's on the precipice of greatness right now?
That's a great question. So I think you could look at it and say, well, any class realistically could get the support it needs to become tier 1, let's say, to be in that top tier. But I think if I'm starting from what heroes are close and just need a little bit of support and could very realistically see this in Everfest, and I'm going to be the place that I start first once this card starts to come out, I'm looking at the Brutes. I think both Reinhardt and Livia are very close. They probably need some shift in format and maybe a card or two to help support strategies. But I do think that they are both very powerful decks and are close to being in that sort of tier 1 place. And light heroes, to be honest, that's where I'm kind of looking. I'm interested to see what support we get from light heroes. I think their stock is very likely to rise because I think if we don't see cards that help realize different play strategies, then we're going to see cards that help develop the current lines of those heroes. Light's interesting. Shadow has so much more depth to it in my eyes, and I don't know if that's just because I'm a bit biased because of playing Chain and Livia, but I do think that we're going to see at least something come through from Light that really supports those classes.
Yeah, for sure. So what hero stocks might rise? Let me think about that, because obviously I think the Wizard it's like a card away. Maybe, right? Depends on the design.
But do you actually think its stock is going to rise? Do you think we're going to see that support to the level that it's actually going to, or is it just going to stay around the same?
If it gets support, I think that its stock will rise. Whether it will get meaningful support, I don't know, right? It depends. Because I want Wizard to be competitive, but I also don't want it to ruin the game. That is the dance you do with Wizard's design. Is that it's either average and it's good and it's fun and it's really interactive, or it's trash, or it breaks the game, right? Like there seems like there's not a lot of kind of delicacy with Wizard. It's either amazing or terrible. So I think that if it gets some support in Everfest, some meaningful support, that it could be a very, very strong class.
I think we're going to see some like side grades for Wizard.
I would love to see side grades. Wizard actually has a somewhat linear game, not a linear game plan, but doesn't have a lot of choice, right? Like there's like the OTK decks, the combo decks, and then there's like general Wizard play, and you can kind of tweak and sub out some cards and adjust your strategy. That being said, like something like GTL Kano, like a Kano that has physical attacks in it as well, is not really well supported at all. So I think that there's a lot of expansion there, because we think about the future of Wizard. Is the future of Wizard literally just arcane damage and instant speed? Probably not. There's probably more. Yeah, there's probably more to that, right? And especially we talk about weaving in some of the attack actions. If you look at the design of Prism and Auras, it looks like that Wizard does have some sort of idea to play attack actions, right? Because if it's not that case, if attack actions will always be terrible in the Wizard class, then the Aura design of Prism is just kind of lame. It just totally dunks on Wizard in every single way, in like a non-fun way, in just like a total hate, non-interactive way. So I think, like extrapolating from Prism's Aura design, I do think that we will move toward a future of Wizard having attack actions.
Hey, you can play Teleshar.
Yeah, I know you can play Talishar. I mean, there's definitely options, right? But it does look like, I mean, looking at the design there, it's like, yeah, I mean, and if you just think about Wizard in general, like, is it all just going to be like some derivative of Kano playing at instant speed with arcane damage? Or, like, yeah, I think that we'll be able to play attack actions, and then it will actually be encouraged by the next Wizard hero.
Yeah, I think it comes from a different hero, to be honest. More of like a summoner style kind of Wizard, maybe. I don't know. But or something that wants to play attack actions anyway. But the other one as well for me is like, do we see like a burn style Kano? Like, the cards like Scalding Rain and Voltic Bolt, like just pure damage output. Like, is that something we see? Less about amplification, more just about pure arcane damage.
Yeah, so that's actually a really cool strategy. It's like semi viable in the current Blitz format, and like the reason why I like that strategy so much is it's actually very interactive. Like
Yeah,
most burn is not super interactive, but the reason that this kind of version of Kano is interactive is because when you're presenting arcane damage that's at a lower threshold, let's say below 3, so like below your opponent's null rune, you're just asking for cards every time. You're trading off the resources, right? Damage for cards, and it's really interesting to watch your opponent kind of figure out like how much do they have to pitch, how much damage can they take in terms of still having enough cards in hand to be able to have a playable turn on the swing back. So I think that's an awesome wizard strategy. I hope that it gets more development.
Yep, I completely agree. I think the last thing I want to say on heroes stock that might rise is just to be honest, it's talented heroes. I think talented heroes stock will rise more than non-talented heroes, and I think that's just the design space of where we are with the game and moving forward. I have this thought. I know we've talked about it before. I know Jason Long talked about it as well. This idea that the talented heroes are kind of the real inception of Flesh and Blood, like the non-talented heroes are like the introduction to Flesh and Blood. And I hope that's not true, to be honest. I hope we do still get to see some of our favorites from the past be viable and strong. Obviously, we know Viserai is a good deck in the current format. Bravo is also very good. But do we start to see that these guys, these heroes, their stock start to drop off, and the talented heroes really make way? And I think we might, to a degree, in Everfest.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting concept because I think that we can reasonably assume that almost every set moving forward that's not a supplemental set will be talented heroes. I don't know if that's been officially declared. So yeah, like where do these original heroes kind of land in that world, right?
Yep. And I think as you start to see new heroes in those classes come about, does that make, like, is Katsu just had his time? Is Katsu done? Is the next set bring us a talented ninja and we never hear from Katsu again? So that would be interesting. I hope not, but at some point it probably makes sense for the game in the long term. And in other TCGs, it's not like other, older heroes or champions or whatever don't basically effectively rotate out or become power crept out. And I hope we don't see things get power crept necessarily, but because of the talent system and that being a full realization, I'm okay with maybe some of the non-talented stuff eventually moving to the wayside. But we talk about hero stock that will fall. So I would think on the inverse side of that, yeah, I think we see non-talented hero stock start to fall. And I'm gonna shut this one out for you, Brendan, and you're not gonna like this, but I think that Kano stock will fall, which you might think is hard to have happen in Classic Constructed, maybe, but in Blitz, I think it could happen, and in Classic Constructed even more so. I just think that Kano could be too powerful for Classic Constructed. I just think that until we see a talented wizard, I think we've got a hero on our hands with that hero ability that's just potentially just too powerful.
Yeah, I mean, well, it would be on brand because every set has been terrible for Kano.
That's true.
Before. they keep just massacring my boy. It's very possible, but like I said, he just needs one card to be maybe a little bit too powerful, maybe just not be explored enough in development, and then boom, he's that's all Flesh and Blood is. Flesh and Blood is just going to be you getting burned by a bunch of wizards. But I think they're very careful on the design, so who knows? I'm hoping. I also would welcome a new wizard, a talented wizard or something like that. But I don't think it's happening in Everfest. But yeah, regarding the competitive viability of Kano, up or down, who knows? But it's definitely going one way. It's probably not staying the same.
Oh, interesting. I think it's staying the same or going down.
yeah, or going down, right? Like I don't know. If it doesn't get anything right, it's just going to be. I feel like with new cards being added to the game, it'll become worse, right? It'll just be garbage.
The funny thing is like it might get better, but then as it sees play, it actually just gets worse. Do you know what I mean? Because there's so many cards now. There's so much spell void. There's so many things to interact with. With you've got Prism, obviously. You've got
spell void, auras, frostbite. I mean, you name it, they just keep it. It's rough. So.
Yeah, like with Kano being less played, these things are less prevalent, right? Like spell void and stuff, people aren't packing as much. But it's funny, maybe if Kano gets some better cards, it actually becomes less competitively viable because then it becomes viable to a degree, and then it becomes way worse than it was before it was quote unquote viable.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, on my end, I would prefer to play, fair games of Kano against people that are prepared for it rather than, bringing it to a tournament and having 50% of my games being like an auto win because people didn't pack Null Rune. But like you said, I think that if everybody teched for Kano during the last meta, the deck's really bad.
Yeah. Look, if someone's offering me 50% auto wins at an event I go to, I'm taking it, Brendan. As long as I can still win my other 50%.
What if you? Oh yeah, but you have to have a chance to win the yeah.
Of course, yeah. I have to have a good chance.
What if you were guaranteed to lose 25%, but you were guaranteed to win 50%? You had, I don't know. It's up to you to win the next 25, but then 25% you're guaranteed to lose. Are you taking that deck?
Nah, no chance. Because the percentage to top 8, you're really tight on even being able to top 8, and then based on those percentage that we're looking at, I'm probably not winning the event. So no, I would say no right now. Maybe ask me again in a year. We'll see how we're going.
Yeah, just yellow the 50-50 combo deck to the World Championship.
Exactly, might be the case. Want to wrap up with where we will be starting with Everfest, Brendan. So probably, once previews start to drop, as we say, in a few weeks, and then the set's only a week away, and then we've got ProQuest. I think my first ProQuest. I don't have one in week 1, I don't think, so far, just looking at what's happening. But, 3 weeks after Everfest drops, I'll be into an event. Probably 2 weeks after, you'll be into an event, and it'll be the same for a lot of people around the globe. So where are we starting? What are we going to be looking at? I think initially focusing on some heroes. Yes, that's going to be happening. Some of the things we think might rise. But as we start to see cards previewed, that's going to give us an idea of where to start looking. Like, okay, here's some more powerful interactions. Here's some cards that we know we were looking for these kind of heroes to push them into playable or potentially tier 1. And that's probably where I'll be starting. Brendan, yourself?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, heroes or kind of specific cards. Like, we look back at Crucible. If I gave you Bloodshot Skalata, you could spend quite a while trying to figure out that card. And looking for strategies. And there was tons of stuff. There was tons of cards that allowed you to do that. So, I mean, focusing on specific cards, building around them. I mean, even something like Chains of Eminence is just, I don't know if it's great, but it's an incredible card. Like, the use case is just so wide. So I think that there'll be a lot of really interesting stuff designed. And we'll probably hone in on that.
Yep. I think looking at the changes to an existing meta as a base is a really good place to start as well, and almost certainly where we'll start. Once we get through New Zealand, Australian Nationals, okay, what does Tier 1, what does Tier 2 look like right now? What does the meta actually shape up as we sort of head into Everfest? And then preview season starts, okay, what cards are going to have impact to the current decks? I think it's a really good place to start. And then outside of that, just brand new things. What will Everfest bring that could, like we say, completely change the way certain heroes play, could change how the meta shakes out, could bring us something that we haven't seen before. Maybe it's a set of weapons that do something completely new. Those are things that I think are really important to look at initially as well, and just explore the power level. A new format, I'm always looking for proactive things to start with, but I am also conscious of, okay, what's the existing meta happening? Maybe a deck that's already here gets really good, or maybe there's a completely new deck.
Yep, and of course, in classic fashion of the new set, we will be spending a large amount of time trying to break the meta, because there's a lot on the line with the ProQuest and then the Pro Season in 2022, and every set is just a new opportunity.
That's your motto. It's an opportunity.
Wink, wink, Jason Chung. No, I'm kidding. So. Yeah, I mean, we hope you enjoyed that. Let us know in the comments what you are looking forward to in Everfest, like what classes you want to, potentially rise in stock or lose in stock, go down.
I wonder what it will be.
Yeah, I wonder what it will be. Everybody's like, we need more Saber Bolton. Coming for me. But yeah, let us know. Really exciting time. Obviously, Crucible of War was developed in an interesting time for Flesh and Blood. Not a lot of people were playing the game. I think that if Crucible had been released today, we would have seen a much different kind of adoption and change to the general meta. So very exciting for Everfest with so many people playing and so much on the line, with 2022 being our first pro season. All right, Hayden. So we are shooting for our YouTube goal of 3,000 subscribers this January. We developed that goal this month. It's a brand new goal, so hopefully we hit it. Hayden and I are both located on Twitter. I'm located at BrendanAPG. Hayden is located at Fiendale, FIEN_Dale. And finally, a big thank you to all of the patrons. And like I mentioned earlier, the Patreon does have tons of extra content, including an extra podcast every month. We actually switched off the live session. Now we do gameplay review of popular games. So last time we did the Hong Kong Nationals Finals. And in addition to that, if we throw up a deck tech on the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel, we have a deck tech, sideboard guide, ratios, charts, Fibonacci sequences, everything you need to pick up the deck and start being competitive on the Patreon. Anyway, until next time, see you in the next episode.
See you later.